Okay, so I'm recording this now. So, as I said, there's a whole range of global challenges, existential risks to solve. We believe that fundamentally one element is at the core of the solutions for this, and this is enabling local communities to become truly self-sufficient and self-reliant. So the reason why we think that is that one of the core problems in our systemic setup as we run our economic systems on the planet at the moment is our financial setup. Fiat GDP, the fiat GDP connection, money over money return will always lead to negative outcome. So we want to enable local communities to log themselves out of the global economy and become locally self-sufficient and self-reliant. And we want to do this by identifying ways of doing that in a local sphere and then scaling those possibilities, those solutions to other communities. So you can think of that as closed functioning systems, and we enable and help enable those closed functioning systems and move them across a country or a continent. In order to answer these points that were just highlighted. I touched on this, we call this the trap, the multipolar trap that we're locked into. On the one hand, politicians cannot make long-term decisions because they're locked into the marketing cycle. And on the other hand, businesses are locked into a cycle where they have to make financial profit for the sake of the system. Up until 71, before Nixon removed the gold standard and replaced it by GDP backing, if you wanted to get rich and powerful, you could do so. But now it is imperative to create profit. Otherwise, the financial system itself will collapse. And that is the core trap that we're in. And we need to find ways of escaping that trap. So, as I said, one way of breaking that is by empowering the people on the ground in local communities, so they become independent of global supply chains that are very likely also to be less stable as the effects of climate chaos start hitting. So it becomes a necessity to become independent of that anyway. And luckily, in the last 25 to 50 years, we've seen a development where the more or less on the basis of the growth, exponential growth of the compute industry, many production methods, many production factors have dramatically decreased in cost. So we're moving towards zero marginal cost in our production distribution capacities, and this can lead to, from centralized production approaches and hub and spoke processes where we produce stuff in a centralized facility, to a truly distributed way of producing things. Because the cost of production for the factory itself goes down. So you can think of this as we're building tiny pieces for the entire production, distribution, refinement aspects of the economy that are distributed across the population and creating more resiliency and independence from failures of other parts of the market or world, or however you want to call that.
Should I take over?
Yeah,
Thomas?
Please do.
So, and we were thinking about that for quite some time, and how a solution for that might look like. And as you can imagine, this is not something you can just build. This is something that needs to emerge. And over the process of the last couple of months, together with our partners in Africa, we have figured out and learned that there is an opportunity that existing communities can be empowered, using participation, collaboration with those communities, but also infusing technology, and not technology by the big blue chip companies, but technology that is invented by startups, and especially by startups that are working in Africa or created in Africa. And as startups and founders tend to do, is to identify problems and create solutions and create new businesses out of that. And so, and we see an opportunity bringing together those communities that are not working in a self-sufficient and self-reliant way right now, also because they are not fully decentralized, and what Thomas has told before is not realized yet, and put them together with the solutions in a structured way, in an ecosystem-centric approach or holistic approach to build this self-sufficient communities by empowerment also through technology. And I mentioned earlier participation, and Thomas and I, who started this initiative that's now called MOTHERLAND, and we were thinking about, okay, what we really can do with our experience of 20 years of technology entrepreneurship, building companies, helping large ones, smaller ones, etc. And what we did was we reached out last year to our African network. We have engaged to over 50 entrepreneurs and experts in the African market all over the continent, and we're trying to figuring out where are the big challenges that might be solvable with this approach. Yeah, so involvement of technology, having the capacities to be scalable, also feasible, so no R&D projects, and also really, really important to build independent, thriving economic entities in Africa on the ground, and not in dependency from Europe, China, or the United States. That's really key to drive the value creation on the continent by companies that started on the continent and provide their services to the people. And all doing this in a very, very humble approach, meaning especially we guys from Europe, so Thomas and I, we have no content ownership. We are just the stewards of the process. We try to keep everyone engaged, bring in our experience and expertise in our networks to make that happen. And we started with kind of a big vision, and it also evolved over time. And we have already achieved 2 steps of our grand master plan, but we still need to achieve number 3 and 4. Number 1 was, according to our principles, identifying a socio-economic leveraging point, because we wanted to make a change or trigger a change and a development where change really can unleash the power of change in a positive way. So therefore, we needed to identify this leveraging point. And the leveraging point, I come later to that, is the post-harvest value chain, because we have learned over the process that if you want to trigger a better food production system, you have to thrive the demand side, yeah, to kick and pull the supply side. So we have identified this part. The next step was, okay, as I mentioned earlier, we had the hypothesis there should be, where problems are and opportunities are, there should be companies around that that try to solve those challenges. And we have identified over 600 of those startups all over Africa, and then qualified them later, and have currently 320 startups in our database that are tackling this along the value chain of food. The step 3 is now we need to identify a community. So we have, so to say, the leveraging point, we have the companies that could trigger the change and support and empower the change. But now we really need to have a community identifying the leveraging point within the community. Yeah, so because there might be different things regarding the project, the origin of the community, and the habitat of the community, and then identifying the challenges, the startups out of the database. This is step 3, which is in progress. That's also why we are talking to you. And number 4 is after we have run the prototype, we need to scale this, because only one community and having the proof is not good enough. Yeah, we need to bring this to as many communities as possible, what we have learned, nationwide, but also continent-wide. And maybe also the rest of the world can also learn something from that. So, and we took that in a couple of phase approach. Yeah, the first phase we started way back in March 2020. Yeah, as I mentioned, 50 entrepreneurs. We ran a survey, we identified the post-harvest value chain, we created this database. The next step was having a consultancy project with a good business school here in Europe. Yeah, we ran through the whole database, qualified all the startups, tagged the startups. In the end, we kicked out more than 50%, and we have reduced it to 324. And currently we are on the stage of talking to people, yeah, because we don't believe everything is perfect, yeah, but we believe we need to share it, we need to learn and find the partners to build and run the prototype, yeah. And one piece of the puzzle obviously is we need to find partnerships, for example, for the community, but also on specific experts. Yeah, for example, we have 2 weeks ago, we talked to a professor from Stellenbosch University, who's an expert in the field of post-harvest value chain. And we also started talking regarding fundraising, because all of this needs to be financed in a sufficient way, yeah, to kick it off, but also with partners that share our vision, really to scale it over the continent, and also repeat it maybe in other fields. So, and what we need to build is, and this is what we came up with, is the Ecosystem Accelerator. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more on this slide. Yeah, so the Ecosystem Accelerator is different than the classical startup accelerators. So why is this? Because the Ecosystem Accelerator not only accelerates the startups, but the Ecosystem Accelerator also accelerates the communities. Yeah, because the startups bring a very important piece of the solution to the community. And by doing this, we are solving challenges by utilizing the solutions of the startups, accelerating the startups with the program, but also accelerating the communities. And putting both pieces together is, in the end, the ecosystem which we are going to accelerate. This is our understanding of the ecosystem accelerators. And therefore, we are currently developing the program. I'm going to show you a quick overview about that. Yeah, we are talking to partners and fundraising, and also talking to local partners and building up the team. Yeah, so because someone has to run that on the ground, Thomas and I, we cannot do that. Yeah, at least not full time. Yeah, so therefore we are going to find the right team on site to really to bring it off the ground. So this is a sketch of such a program. So I've built, over the course of the last 10 years, I built 4 or 5 accelerator programs. Yeah, not only in Germany, in Berlin, but also in Sri Lanka and currently in Addis Ababa. So there's kind of some experience in doing that. And in the end, as I said, should not only be startups that are ready to receive the next financing round, but also a community where we can measure, yeah, the improvement and the impact of the program to the community. And so it's really accelerating both. So, and if this is successful, as I said, the community should take a lot from that. Yeah, the sponsors and the investors will take a lot because they see they invested in startups that are really creating impact. Yeah, they see a proof of concept. So if it's working out, it's ready to scale, which is good. Yeah, and for the sponsors and for the investors, they will receive validated access to startups that are going to change parts of the big challenges all over Africa. And the startups, yeah, they are going to have access to an expert community. They maybe have access to a new country. Yeah, for example, a startup coming from Kenya or from Ghana. Yeah, and we help to run their product or integrate their solution into the community. Yeah, this is kind of a business development we do for the startup. Yeah, and they also will receive some pilot financing to run the pilot. And if you're working with developing organizations, this is really creating a good impact to their goals. So this is more or less it. Yeah, so this is Thomas and myself, our African partners so far, and also some first folks from Europe, from the impact and startup scene that are actively supporting us, and also institutions that are supporting this initiative so far. Good. So this was a first quick run through. So this deck was just finished a couple days back, and we are still practicing it, so it will be way smoother. So it was more or less the first run through Thomas and I did. Yeah, but this is going to evolve now over time, and so it will become way better than it was right now. But hopefully you got the idea, yeah, behind that, and it resonates also with some of the thoughts and approaches you have. Arnold, thank you.
Well, you're looking for a response from me.
Yep.
Sorry. Yeah.
So Arnold, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think.
No.
I do see a lot of touch points, and I think what separates us is in some cases is just the jargon that might be used, or the language that's used for particular sort of processes. I think the presentation, I think, tells what you do, but I'm not sure if it does really touch on the application of it and how it's applied in communities. I thought that would have been maybe a bit useful for me to understand. So, I mean, you touched on post-harvest and the importance of post-harvest technology, or the post-harvest value chain, but in what context and with what kinds of communities? Where are you looking to apply it? Yeah, so I think some context there would be useful.
So we've played with trying to define that a little bit, because what we know for sure, it's community is an area in which so it has to work in an enclosed community, that's for sure. So without any attachment to a global or even a national economy. We're currently thinking that could be somewhere around 5,000 to 10,000 people, several farms, and a couple of thousand people that are supported by that. The other aspect of this, but that makes it difficult to define community, is that if what we're saying is right about the distribution of the elements of this post-harvest value chain, so refinement or storage, refinement, distribution, transport between those points, are truly distributed, then the shape of the community is very flexible. So it doesn't have clear constraints, but I would say it should be, in terms of humans, around 5,000 to 10,000 people, not more. Does that make it a little bit clearer?
Yeah, I think so. I think I mean, if you know and are familiar with South Africa, I mean, some of the communities are only 500. Even the community we're working with in the Northern Cape is 1,500 people. So I think those are also probably the most important communities to intervene in, because they're so removed from any ecosystem, from economic to just knowledge.
So
it's a question from my side. So your intervention is particularly focused on the post-harvest value chain.
Yes,
that's where we intervene.
So in phase one, we had an open question towards where is the best leverage point for systemic change towards creating self-sufficiency and self-reliance.
Yeah.
So what has the strongest possible ripple effects up and downstream in the system? And the group identified the post-harvest value chain. This is why we are fixed on the post-harvest value chain, because we believe if we solve that, then the rest will follow.
Okay. So it's kind of a chicken egg challenge, right? So what is first? Yeah, so it's interconnected, and you cannot separate it from each other. I think that's clear, and there will also be always interfaces. But the question that came up for us was, okay, like Thomas said, where we need to stick our lever, yeah, to make this whole system work better for the people, yeah, and we learned, okay, there's a lot of information asymmetries, yeah, in terms of what is required, where and when, what type of quality, yeah, whether it's B2B or B2C for direct consumption, yeah, and then there are a lot of physical aspects like distribution, like storage, yeah, like cooling chain, etc., etc., etc. And if this is working better, the efficiency of the overall system will probably improve way more than just having better production techniques, etc. But if there is more value creation in the system, yeah, it also will be a trigger towards more investments in the agriculture itself. Yeah, because if there is a functioning market, yeah, it makes more sense to say, okay, I buy this input or I learn about this technology, yeah, to become a better farmer, because it's not useless, but it creates better opportunities for me because the market or the people are demanding it. And if I'm not going after it, I'm going to get out of the game. Yeah, and that's why we believe post-harvest is kind of the first trigger. Yeah, but we think it holistically. That's why we need to work together with the farmers, because it's also starting with them, how to get the information into the system, right? And how to communicate back what maybe people saying, what they want and when they want it and what type of quality they want it. Yeah, it needs to be communicated back to the farmers, because this is really key to make decisions on what to seed and when to harvest, etc. That's the thinking behind it. That's why we came up with the post-harvest value chain.
Makes absolute sense.
Herman, you want to say something?
If I may, I think that it also will very much determine and become clearer the moment we have identified a prototype.
Yeah.
And what I think in that context is absolutely critical, that whatever improvement in efficiency we achieve in the post-harvest value chain must also filter down to the actual farming, because there's no point in improving, let's say, the profitability of a trader who. So what I'm saying is, it very much depends on how we define, how we identify, define, and work with a prototype.
It has to have an effect, a measurable effect to the farmer, because they're
Correct.
part of the system. Yeah, so it will have an effect on the people themselves as well. Yeah, but the farmers are part of the system. Yeah,
Correct.
and so if you want to approach it holistically, we need to, so to say, measure the effect on the farmer side. Yeah, and it's really not about efficiency. It's more about the effectiveness of a system, not the efficiency. That's a big difference, right? So, and maybe one last thing to point out here, it's really important, yeah, that we listen to the needs, to the specific needs of a community. Yeah. So, like we said, we are not coming from Germany or from South Africa, from somewhere else. We have a master plan and now we roll it out. Yeah. No matter what, it's really about identifying the community, then learning what are the specifics, yeah, challenges of the community, and then we need to design the contents around what we do. Whether there is a focus point on education, yeah, that might be a trigger point, right? Or it's really on logistics, because logistics is key. Yeah, or it's on input, yeah, or whatever. So there might be a specific focal point, and then we need to go through our database and figuring out, okay, which are the companies that have the best solution, yeah, for that type of challenge. And we cannot have that right now.
But I'd like to bring in one other point and then give the microphone over to Lerato, who also raised her hand. I think it is, in a way, it form follows function. So once we have a community to work with, and be that 500 people, 1,500, 5,000 or 10,000 community, it really depends on where we find the best breeding ground for this. Then we will be able to figure out together with that community where the strongest need and leverage point is, and then work on solving that. It's not so much that we want to stick with one specific approach. Our goal is to build an ecosystem that functions, because as a startup, it's always hard. You're building a piece of the future, but if the rest of the world doesn't follow up, you're alone with the piece of the future and you will fail. So by creating a closed environment in which we can level up the future on many levels at the same time, that is what the ecosystem does, and that is what the local community does. And then taking that functioning thing and moving it to somewhere else as a second step. So that's what we're looking for primarily, and not be totally focused on our previous plans. Berato.
Hi, everybody. My question is towards Arnold. Thank you so much for a beautiful presentation you've done. I really need to understand what you've said earlier on. I understand your focus is on commercial-based project, whereby the farmer makes a living out of it. But now my question is, what type of the community are you working with, and what impact will Motherland bring to this type of prototype through your commercial based project? I think that's all that I needed to ask.
Yeah, so I think to just be sure of your questions, your first one is, what kinds of communities do we work with? And two, what value could Motherland potentially bring to those projects? Is that correct?
What type of the community are you targeting, and what kind of impact, because it's going to be a prototype, what kind of impact will Motherland bring out of the project? And finally, probably, is the project already operational, or is something that you are still looking into getting it established?
Yeah, so I think first, the community that we target is, we don't discount any community. So if we identify that intervention would be useful and can work and will change livelihoods, we will intervene or look to partner with that community. So our focus is primarily previously disadvantaged communities, to bring them into a position where they can grow through generations and have more than they've historically had, and able to contribute to the next generation. So for example, we would like to see systemic change. So if we create jobs for people now and are able to contribute to their livelihood, their children should be able to get a matric and then potentially get into university and get an education, which means they can either go back into the community and improve things within that community, or leave that community and potentially send money back to that community. We've worked with communities of white farmers, colored Nama people in the Northern Cape, Black communities. So we've done the whole sort of whatever community we feel we can intervene in. That is our mandate. We're a strongly South African company that believes in South African communities. And yeah, so some of our projects are historical. We've implemented, we've shown success, and then we've left those communities. In the Northern Cape, we've implemented. We're at 100 hectares of raisin vineyards, and in Gauteng currently, we only have the land, and we haven't implemented anything. We're close to. We're about 2 to 3 months away from our first project implementation, which will be in partnership with a company by the name of Wensleydale, who produce organic foods for IDH. IDH is, I think, a Dutch-based firm, and they assist with the development of or they're like supporting Wensleydale in their production lines, so that they can scale their project. And Wensleydale is a female-owned, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, it's a female-owned business, successful Black-owned business in South Africa, doing drying food, so they dry their product on site. So that would be our first project, and that's going to be at approximately between 40 and 80 hectares to start with, depending on how much funds come through for that. But yeah, to go on to the value that Motherland could potentially add, I think, you know, we could continue the conversation and then see within future projects where you could potentially intervene and potentially also apply or pilot your interventions. I think right now our position is that we bring the market to our producers. So I think we believe in a very similar thing, in that without the market, you're not going to empower anybody. And what we try to do is at least some of the processing on site, so that the community visually sees the value being added. Because often you just remove your product out of the ground and then it ends up on the back of somebody's bakkie, and that's the last you see of it. And or you just don't have access to the market. So our projects try to bring the market closer to the producer, so they see real value. And then we also try to extend where they get a margin. So instead of just at the farm gate, you take it maybe 1 or 2 steps further, so that they actually share in the value further down the value chain. So I think it's an open conversation that we can have to see, you know, in future. I mean, the context is 30,000 hectares. If you've got 30,000 hectares and you do 300 projects of 100 hectares, so I mean, there's 300 potential projects that could come up. So we're embarking on a 5-year journey now to execute on this project.
Yeah, I think it sounds good.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you.
I think it sounds good to stay in the loop and stay and see where we connect. I also think that with you having an idea about what we do, maybe if you see something coming up, then you can send it our way.
Absolutely.
Our next really relevant task is to get an LOI with one community leader on the ground, so we know who we're actually speaking with, and we can enter a conversation about what the most crucial aspects are, so we can actually start filtering for them, start finding the correct startups that we could bring into the accelerator program. And while we're doing that, Sebastian and I are working on preparing the accelerator program and everything that comes with that here from Europe. So that's our critical path at the moment.
Great.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
I'll
Yeah,
stop the
thanks
recording.
for,
It's been